Hello, church family. This is Pastor Jeff, and I'm bringing to you the second devotional talk in a series that Pastor Andrew and I are doing entitled In Times Like These. This is a series we're doing studying and looking at the great stories of men and women in the great controversy in the Bible and in history who have prepared for, have handled, and have shined in difficult times. So please join me as we take a look at chapter 1 of Great Controversy, the chapter called The Destruction of Jerusalem. And I'm going to try to make this short, so I probably won't be able to say all that I want to say, but that's okay, we got more time in the future. What I want to point out in the chapter 1 of The Destruction of Jerusalem is, first of all, that Jesus very much came to the Jewish leaders and the Jewish people, and he said, listen, the trajectory that where you're heading is not a good one. You need to accept me. I'm the Prince of Peace. I'm the way of life. I'm the truth. And in fact, because Jesus looked at them and he said things to them like, hey, you guys have a lot of hate. You need to love your neighbor. A lot of hate for the Romans. A lot of hypocrisy, bad relationship, fake relationship with God. And the leaders especially were oppressive, and they took advantage of the poor. They were wolves in sheep's clothing. Jesus says in Luke chapter 20, verse 47, beware of the scribes. They devour widows' houses. For show they make long prayers. The same shall receive greater damnation. And so Jesus is just saying to the Jewish people, he say, listen, your leadership is leading you down the wrong path. You guys have developed a culture of hate, but you think just because you got the temple of God that it's going to stand forever. And I'm telling you, not one stone will be left upon another. This utterly shocked the disciples. How could the Jewish culture could abysmally, destructively come to an end to that great of a destruction? And Jesus said, hey, I'm telling you, it will happen. And he prophesied it, and it happened in AD 70. So what I want to point out, I think that is incredible in the story, is there's three fulfillments there's three things that happened to the people: fighting, famine, and fire. I want to talk about that for a moment, but before I do, let me just say this. The Jewish people rejected Christ, and they rejected God's better ways. And bit by bit, their culture transformed the people into monsters. You could not have imagined the tragedy that happened in the destruction of Jerusalem among the Jewish people for each other. The fighting was so intense that in Jesus' day, you wouldn't have believed them. And let me just walk through what happened. First of all, in chapter 20, page 28, Great Controversy says that the people became satanic in their cruelty, in the family and the nation, among the highest and the lowest classes alike. There was suspicion, envy, hatred, strife, rebellion, and murder. There was no safety anywhere. Friends and family betrayed one another. Parents slew their children, and children their parents. This is tragic. This is terrible. Well, but when there's war and there's fighting and there's people who have encouraged a hatred of Romans and a hatred of Gentiles and a hatred of opposing forces, like that collapses a society. And sure enough, it destroyed everybody's relationship. And when things get intense, that's what happens. If you've been out shopping for toilet paper or seen the videos of YouTube on it, like people fight over the stupidest things. You don't think in the destruction of Jerusalem they were fighting? Absolutely, they were fighting. It got so bad that that they destroyed each other's food resource supplies that should have fed millions for years, but instead they burned each other's the opposing factions' food supplies and ended up with a famine inside Jerusalem. They couldn't go out of the cities because the Roman forces had surrounded them. And anyone who came out would get captured and crucified or sold into slavery. Well, so fierce were the pangs of hunger that men would gnaw the leather of their belts and sandals and the covering of their shields. People would sneak out at night to grab a few herbs from the soil around the city, but at risk of the Roman soldiers capturing them and dying. And then if they made it back into the city with their plants, they would get robbed. It was just absolutely atrocious. And then the day came when the Roman soldiers invaded the city. All the Jewish people retreated to the temple for certain that God would take care of them there. The Roman soldiers came in. They threw a firebrand on one of the cedar posts. They started the temple on fire. It got so it created such a scene of havoc that the soldiers, it brought out the most violent feelings, and they started murdering all the Jewish people so much that it says terrible blood flowed down the temple steps like water. People shouted, Ichabod, the glory is departed. The fire was so intense that the temple gold melted and flowed into the cracks between the stones. And when all was said and done, the Roman soldiers came back and they ripped those stones apart to get to that melted gold, fulfilling Jesus' prophecy that not one stone will be left upon another. Tragic, tragic story. Only 39 years after Jesus died. How could the Jewish people come to this? Fighting each other, destroying each other's food. Well, because they rejected the Prince of Peace, the truth, the life. And I think the lesson for us, and today, at least the lesson that I'm walking away with, is the realization that but for the grace of God, there go I. You know, I'm a man of peace. I love getting along with people. I'm not a fighter. I've always been a good kid, good guy. But I've realized the truth of the scriptural words that the heart is deceitfully wicked above all things. And to think that without God's grace, that I would never do anything bad or violent or angry or mean or treacherous. To think that I'm an innocent, pure person is not realistic. I'm a loaded gun. Without the grace of God strengthening my soul and spirit, without under the right circumstances, I could do bad things. And I know, you look at the history of Germany and how under abysmal circumstances, the Nazis were able to convince so many of the Germans to do atrocious acts. And we all look back and go, oh, why? Well, they must have been bad people. No, it's that the culture reached a climax, an apex, where people did horrible things. And I think the lesson for me in times like these is I want to be like the Christians who took Christ's words and lived a life of love and of hope and of truth and of generosity, such that they never saw their souls degraded to violence and infighting. They never saw their community destroyed like the Jews did. And I think it's important for us in the last days, not only to, make sure physically we're good, we're stocked up and all that good stuff, but more importantly, to make sure that we're accepting the Prince of Peace into our hearts and life. So more in a few days, but Lord bless you with that short devotional thought from Great Controversy on how to prepare for times like these.